Mark, there are many ways in which we can, I would say, carve out or create a sense of belonging and identity. And of course, getting tattooed, and perhaps more specifically, intentional tattoo, is one such pathway and our primary focus of this conversation. But this idea of belonging and identity and carving this out, or this idea of like creating a name for ourselves, I reckon it's an interesting thing because this is potentially more so a recent phenomena born from a world of hyper individualism and
Mm,
disconnection from a more intimate web of culture and community that might have traditionally held us more together in a tighter web. And this diaspora that, I don't know if you've experienced this or this has been part of your story, it's certainly been part of mine. The diaspora that many of us experience of being uprooted from ancestral, cultural, biogeographical origins. And then for some of us, we're trying to pick up the pieces and figure out what we can regarding these larger conversations of place, people, culture,
yeah.
tradition, purpose. Because if we were to look at some of the more tribal cultures or to smaller villages and communities, belonging and identity is perhaps not necessarily something that we would carve out or create as individuals. And that might have been more
Mm,
so an inherent aspect of just being born into the tribe or village of community. And then your sense of belonging and identity was fostered through this larger community tapestry and was reinforced by specific cultural initiation rites, which was facilitated by
mhm.
the adults, the elders in the community. So, really, what I'm doing here is offering one way of framing identity and belonging as both a personal search and a larger inheritance from culture
Mhm.
and community. And perhaps then it's also speaking to tattoos in one way as a sort of reclamation or exploration for some of us, a response to this modern disconnection. So, I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot of ways that you could take this, but I'll leave you with this question, see where you want to flow with it.
Yep.
But how do you see intentional tattooing bridging this gap that's been left by the absence of deeper culture, elderhood,
Yeah.
adequate
Yeah, yeah.
initiation?
Okay. Well, like I said, there's a lot there, a lot of ways we can take it. So, I guess a good place to start is, just understanding what tattooing is, because once you have this foundation of, like, what's actually happening when you get tattooed, it's easier to slot it into some of those, questions that you have.
Nice.
You know, it's linked to culture, linked to identity,
Mm.
linked to belonging. Because it's like one of the threads of this web you're talking about. That's why all people in every single location on the planet developed some form of tattooing that was really refined, you know, and put into practice within their societal settings, along with all their other stuff, story and song and, paintings and carvings and, all the things that they did. Tattooing was just like another cultural artifact, right? And culture's about like tending to the land so you can actually sow something in it, right? That's what culture is.
Yeah,
So
to
it's like we have,
cultivating the land.
yeah,
Yeah.
come from cultivate, right? To make the earth good
Mm.
for something to grow, right? And so I think we're in a place where we actually haven't cultivated something that's allowed something to grow yet.
Mm.
We're kind of at this stage where it's like things that like all sorts of things are shooting up. The seed bank is giving us everything. It's not like a consistent growth yet. It's like there's lots of weeds, there's all sorts of things happening. But I like to frame tattooing up like on the premise that it's the story of your journey through life for anyone, right? So even right now, let alone when it was in a better fitted place to people, it's this concept of story. Story is narration. Narration's the way we see the world, the way we perceive ourselves, the way we perceive how we fit in the world. So there's the belonging, right? And that's linked to identity. And then the journey aspect is like what's happening in terms of it's transforming you, it's moving you through a passage, right? Journey is just like sort of moving from one state of being to another. With tattooing, it's like from not tattooed to tattooed or to more tattooed, or each time you're moving away from the version of yourself prior to the process, right? And it all sort of gets strung together. So if we think of it in that way, that tattooing's the story of your journey through life, then we can see that if you're being intentional with that, if you're paying attention to it, if you don't think it's just artwork, or it's not getting done to be cool, or it's not whimsical, then you're in this active process of writing the story and on the journey of working out who it is that you are. So it's really obvious that it informs our self-perception once you look at this.
Mhm.
You're putting these markings on your body, and you're saying like, this is who I am, or this is where I've been, or hopefully they can be a marker of where you want to go.
Mm.
Maybe we'll get to that sort of point.
Mhm.
Um, but I think right now, like our current climate is quite simply that the kind of paths or the avenues that were really well walked and really well known in different cultures, in different groups, have just become a bit like overgrown. They've become a bit overgrown, and it could be this, it could be these screens where it's like all of these other aspects are coming in. There's like a lot of non-native information,
Sure.
right? Like our world's been opened up. It's very porous now.
Mhm.
So, and even then things just like travel, in the last century. So we've gone from being like very rooted in place and people and experience and information to being really opened up, and you can kind of think of it like, uh, if we think of terrain, there's like this area and all these things are growing there. You have the natural environment. If you think all of these different environments that are separate start sort of mixing, you're not going to really know what's growing there anymore. And everything that's growing, which is us, is trying to work out, who we are, which piece of soil we come from, which sort of seed we are, you know, trying to understand these things. And at the end of the day, it's like everyone is just growing together, and we're sort of creating one new environment. But it hasn't been happening long enough that there's a story or a myth or a knowing that has actually substantiated itself and stuck.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's the way I view it at the moment anyway.
Yeah. On some previous podcasts that I listened to you speaking on, you had some really great ways of putting language to or articulating, and I'm going to use my own words here, but this
Mm.
re reviving of the tattoo culture and some of the journey arc of traditional versus, or maybe not even verses, but just this entire narrative arc of going from the traditional historical tattoo culture into our contemporary cultural ways of approaching tattoo. So it'd be great
Yeah.
to hear you put some more language and kind of tease apart these threads a bit more when it comes to the historical cultural context and the evolution of tattoo
Yeah.
origins.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so like the contemporary lens, again, it's just in this infantile state basically, where it's quite empty. It's, the way that tattoos were used in the past has been broken down, and it's, we can zoom in, and I'll do that. I'll give a breakdown of like what it used to be, and sort of how we got to where we are now,
Okay.
and we can kind of like put all these pins in history and in time and go, this happened and this happened and this happened. But you can also zoom out and just see it as like a very natural cyclical process, seasonal process.
Mm-hmm.
The way the older culture is just viewed time generally,
Yeah,
right?
that's a good way to frame it.
And yeah, yeah. And so, maybe the past 200 to 300 years has been that sort of winter or that die off of the growth that was there the season before, you know. And so in the season before, the fruit that was available was this really sacred, elevated and revered relationship with tattooing, because people knew who they were, right? It was inherited, to just go back to what you were saying initially. We have this experience of, like, for myself, born in Australia, but my dad's side's from Yugoslavia, my mum's side's from like Denmark and England. Then my wife, her parents are from southern India, but they came over from South Africa. Now my kids are a mix of that, born in Australia. So it's like who we are is a big question mark. We're not inheriting it in a very clear way anymore. Um, so these cultures, you had tattooing as one thread of their tapestry, like you said,
Mm.
of their story. They knew who they were, and tattooing was used in a way that helped uh, embed that,
Mhm.
almost initiate, yes, but it's very much this like embedding of the information in a way that's really different to what we do now. So if you could imagine the tattoos that you were going to get were already being worn by all the people in the stage of life that you were moving towards. So you had this like real life representation of who someone is that visually reads in the way that you're moving towards. And so you receive these marks and it kind of like pulls you towards a particular way of being. You know, it was very sequential and healthy and understood. Everyone understood it. So you got a tattoo and it's like everybody knows what's happening for you, you know, and it sort of just helped reinforce things like the environment and the person getting tattooed. The relationship was just so solid. And if we think of like cyclically and seasonally moving into all the things that sort of played out in the past, 250, 300 years with misunderstanding and destruction of different cultural systems
Mhm.
and ways, without breaking that down too much and,
Sure.
and trying to sort of understand what happened
Yeah, I'm
there.
sure most of us get
Um,
it to some degree. Yeah.
big disruptions, right? So, tattooing was literally stopped um, among other um, rites and practices.
Mhm.
They were kind of all sort of stopped, and for that reason, a lot of stuff was lost. And tattooing at that point in time also went through like a bit of a polarity shift, right? If you think it was used to uplift and elevate people within those cultures, and someone comes in that doesn't understand it and says it's bad, you know, and then they start to use it in that way. So this misperception or this inversion of it is how it starts to get used. So they use it to tattoo slaves, tattoo prisoners, tattoo criminals, that sort of thing. Um, and so at that stage, you can see that in more of the collective experience, the collective consciousness, tattooing actually goes through a transfer and becomes this negative thing. It's used in more of like a shadow way than a light way. But inherently, it does the same thing. Doesn't matter who's wielding the sword. It has particular functions. It's powerful, and so it sort of switched hands. And so our parents' generation before that, they've had to work through this perspective that they inherited that tattoos are bad, yeah, and land with us and the generation under us, tattoos aren't bad anymore. Their artwork, their self-expression, they're accepted. But at the same time, um, we've washed out the contaminants of that change, so we don't think it's bad anymore, but it also doesn't have any of the value of the reverence and the sacredness and the fittedness that it once had,
Right, we're all
right?
somewhat in a liminal stage here.
Yeah, yeah, so it's like if you use the example of water, this is the easiest one I found, is like spring water from the source, right? We're out in the bush, we find a spring, it's just like rich. Then, we dam it or we tap it or we bottle it, you know,
Mhm.
Mount Franklin bottle, put it in a shelf, put it in a truck. That water, and it gets contaminated, starts to change its structure, right? And a lot of time you have like very polluted water. If we think about running through the gutters in the streets and through the pipes and stuff. Um, and so if we want to get rid of the contaminants in that water, we filter it, and then it's just empty, right? So you actually need to put minerals back into that for it to be good for you, to actually hydrate you, right? You need to put salt, you need to put magnesium, all the rest of it. And so tattooing's kind of at that stage. It's like there are people currently that are going, I can get tattooed. There's something in me that feels like I should get tattooed even, right? Like the seed wants to germinate. I'm going through a change and I feel like marking it on my body. And then you look around and it's like, it's just all empty. It's like, it's just all this Purea water on the Woolworths shelf. That's all you can get, you know? There's still some real nasty stuff as well, And then there isn't actually a lot of access to very rich, healthy, nourishing experiences within the tattoo space yet, but it's happening. There's people that are going like, cool, this is how you do it. We'll just we'll put a little bit of intention back in. We'll pay a bit more attention. Let's think about our roots. Let's think about our ancestry. Let's think about beyond us, let's think about these metaphysical aspects. What are we working with that's in front of us that we can't see yet? And so people start integrating these into their process, and it's not refined yet. We don't have a structure that is set in stone. I'd like to see that. If I think about sort of long time frames, it's like, cool, maybe we can come up with something that you can sort of pass on and creates a little bit of pattern,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah,
But
well, from what I've seen of your work, it seems like you're certainly contributing to that in your own meaningful way with both the tattoo pathway and then your podcast, Tattoos with Intention.
Mhm.
And whether you want to talk about them now or we circle back around to them later on in conversation, but I'm also thinking about this statement that I heard you made, and it's a differentiation between being a tattoo artist versus being a
Mm.
tattoo guide. And I'd love for you
Yeah,
to speak into that a little bit more. It seems like it
yeah,
fits this thread nicely.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, I mean, that's sort of come out of trying to articulate different concepts for the tattoo pathway stuff.
Mm.
Because basically we're trying to sort of set up some type of framework that uh, doesn't tell people how to get tattooed or what to get tattooed or anything like that. More just like gives them a bit of structure so that they can navigate what's happening, with a bit more buoyancy. And I was going like, what is the difference? I've gone through these different stages learning to tattoo, uh, then like obviously learning about myself, learning about more of the initiatory space and spiritual realms and all of these different links. And I started out in a place where I was in a walk-in tattoo shop, and the person I'm learning from there, the role they wore was a tattooist. They weren't an artist. They didn't know how to draw. They needed me in art school to do the drawings for them, and they'd come in and they just trace this thing.
This was
Uh,
was this your starting point, was it, as an apprentice?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, as an apprentice,
Mhm.
the only place I could get work was like a biker walk-in tattoo shop,
Right.
right? And and they were tattooists. This is like the contemporary tattooist, um,
That I'm
or
on a
the ta
similar boat there. That was my reference point when I just turned 18 and going to visit a variety of tattoo parlors in my local
yeah,
hometown area. That was my reference point, just tattooists that were kinda had that bikey type of flavor.
yeah, yeah. So that's the inherited perspective of what tattooing was. So if our parents think of tattooing, that's what they think of,
Yeah, that's like going back
right?
20 years ago now.
Yeah,
So it's
they
been
think
a
about the
while.
tattooist. Yeah. And so, there's sort of like unhealthy and healthy, variation on that. The guy I worked with, unhealthy as. But then I saw some tattooists where like they meant well and they could trace a tattoo really well. And if you gave them something that for them to copy, they'd do that, and they kind of work in that way, right? Bit of like a just a technician. And then you get the tattoo artist, and that's kind of like our generation. Our generation went like, hey man, we don't need to be like doing this biker thing. I can draw better than this guy. And we get this generation of artists, these tattoo artists, where the tattooing actually becomes a personal project. So it's not in the shadow anymore. Again, we filtered out the unhealthy stuff. It's like I'm going to start doing art on people's bodies and there's all the people going like, I'm a canvas. I want to get some cool artwork. Express myself. And so you get this relationship where you have the tattoo artist and the art, like the craft, goes through a big technical leap. Really does. Huge technical leap. But again, we haven't put in that valuable essence. We haven't reattached and tethered the things that got disrupted. So that's where the tattoo guide layer comes in. So if I think about what's actually taking place when I see a traditional tattoo process, or what's taking place when I'm leading someone through a process and I've actually taken the tattoo artist hat off. So there's nothing that I actually want to tattoo on anyone. It's like if there's something I want to express, if there's an artwork I want to do, I'll do it on a canvas. The last thing I want to do is tattoo it on someone's body because it's not my tattoo, not my body. It's not my story. It's theirs, right? But you can technically get really good at tattooing through the tattoo artist's hat, and you can understand your tools and all of these other aspects of the process through the tattooist hat. But then you get to a point where it's like, can you put on another hat, which is understanding there's actually a connection to this person's soul, and also spirit. And so there's like a bit of a partnership happening in terms of who the person is. There's sort of like the river of their ancestry that's being tapped into, right? Because we're working with the body, we're working with blood. And then there's this other aspect of the unknown and the mystery and the thing that they're moving towards that can be optimized, that can be connected to, and a relationship can be formed there. And so you come into a place of being a guide. You're using tattooing. That's our sort of like the medium, right? Um, but it's just one aspect of this really big process. And there's so someone that's I think someone that's on this walk or this path. There are a lot of people that you and me would be working with, and that we're on ourselves, right? Okay, there's more to this. We need to pay attention. What's going on? You have guides come in around you in so many different ways, and tattooing is one of those spaces. So I think for anyone that's doing tattoos, putting on the tattoo guide hat is just that, I guess, that fundamental layer of having to humble yourself, or if we use like the traditional language, like hollowing yourself out
Mhm.
so that you can actually do this job and contribute in a way that isn't about you, um, and allows the person to see what it's actually about for them.
Hmm. Yeah, all
You
of
know?
that's so interesting. Hey, over the past
Mm,
few years, I've certainly seen a lot more. I would call them intentional tattoo artists, but perhaps they do consider themselves to be more intentional tattoo guides. I don't know. I can't make that
mm,
distinction or that discernment for them, but they're
yeah.
popping up on my social media feeds a lot more. And I dare say there will be a few, or at least a couple, that'll be tuning into our conversation. And
Mm,
my question to you was going to be, what are some of the things that are running through your mind when someone approaches you for tattoo work as a tattoo guide? And you mentioned working with ancestry, with blood and bone, and also this part of the mystery. But then you threw a
mhm,
spanner in the works right there where you said hollowing yourself out and becoming more of a clear vessel or a hollow bone to work
mm,
with something greater beyond our own sense of self. So I'm
yeah,
curious if you have any other particular frameworks or thoughts that you lean upon when someone does approach you for this work.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'll also just tag in there off the back of the last one. It's like these labels that we're using there, or we're exploring. Um, everyone's like a mix of these things,
In terms of
right?
tattoo artist, tattoo guide,
Yeah,
sure,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So like if it's not about like someone listening and going like, oh yeah, I'm a tattoo guide, or someone going like, I need to look for someone who says they're a tattoo guide. It's not like that. It's more like just being able to sort of do a bit of an audit around what it is that you're doing, or pay attention to the person that's working with you, and feeling into how much, like what the ratio is in any given moment. It's like this person's like really dropping into being a guide right now. They're really dropping into being a tattoo artist right now, because they're trying to make it look good, or they're really dropping into the tattooist right now. They're tuning their machines. It's like which of these things do you want the person that you're working with to sort of have at the forefront? Sort of, are they aware of all of those different layers or not? So, yeah, I just thought I'd put that in there. In terms of frameworks, what sort of is going through my mind when someone's coming to get tattooed? It depends where I engage with them, um, because there's like a lot of people think of tattooing as just the moment you're getting tattooed, right? So it's like, what's tattooing? And people are like, oh, it's like, they picture being in the process of getting tattooed. But that's like kind of the middle where there's a whole process of approaching a tattoo. You know, that sort of that calling stage, right? It's like, what's happening here? Having to pay attention to what has sort of catalyzed the idea of getting tattooed in the first place. So you're thinking about getting tattooed. So you're approaching it. So when I engage with someone in the approach, it's really coming from that guide space more than any of the technical side. Listening to them, you know, making sure that where they're coming from is grounded in why they might want to get tattooed around more than like what the tattoo is. That's a big part of it. So initially, I'm trying to sort of catch direction of where people are coming from. You know, it's like, are they coming in and it's an external thing and they're going like, I want to get this tattoo of kookaburra. You know, why do you want a tattoo of a kookaburra? And they're like, they're fixated on what it is that they want. It's external and something outside of them has influenced it. And trying to get them to think about why they want it. So the internal direction, like what's going on? What is that thing sort of evoking? So I try and sort of, yeah, just gently guide people to understand why more than what. Um, a big part of that is it's been real funny to sort of see and discover this is our tattoo ideas a lot of the time, because we're so fixated on the what, and that's what we've inherited. They're just they're just our internal dialogue, you know. So a lot of the time, these images are just a part of ourselves trying to explain what's happening. This is actually why you feel like getting tattooed, you know, like the blue butterfly. Oh, I'm seeing this blue butterfly. I want to get a blue butterfly tattoo. And it's like it's just a communication that you're going through transformation.
Hmm.
It doesn't need to be a butterfly. Like what you're seeing, like you are the butterfly. You know, it's like in this dreamscape. It's like you're having a communication around what the process is that you feel like recording on your body at the moment. So like pay attention to the butterfly. What markings are on the butterfly?
Hmm.
What shapes are on the butterfly? You know, because that's you, right? So a lot of the time there's in that approach phase, it's a bit of like catching and listening and trying to shape the tattoo in a way or shape their process of the tattoo in a way where they start to engage with it more intentionally.
Mhm.
They start to see it as a process, um, not so much like let's get the tattoo done. You know, not rushing to start a tattoo, not rushing to do a drawing. You know, a lot of people are like, so how do we do this? Can we get a drawing done? It's like slow down. You don't need to do a drawing. Let's work out what it's about first. You
Mhm.
know, um, there's a lot of that, and then I think the hollowing out part, that's more like when you're in the middle, when you're doing the action piece, you know, when you're actually tattooing,
Mhm.
um, that's when there's like it seems to be less thinking. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on
Mhm.
internally, but there's less thinking when it comes to that.
Mm.
I'm trying to understand that one a bit more so there can be a deliverable piece, but it's a bit hard actually.
There's some great insight there. And I was going to bring up this for a point of conversation, the
Mm,
bringing of more awareness to someone's tattoos or the tattoo process. And I was going to bring this up in regards to tattoo regret and identity crisis and these sorts of things. So we'll double click on that a little bit later on. But as you're speaking, it's making me
mm,
think of the classic journey arc of a rite of passage in terms of three stages. And the first stage, if you're familiar with it, it's the preparation, it's the approach. Some could also say the severance, which could absolutely apply in this regard, a severance or a shifting from one stage of life into the next. And then, of course, you've got that middle process, which is your threshold crossing, your actual experience. And then it's the return journey or the incorporation. And I love that word incorporation in the context of passage rites, where it's like in corpus, into the body. It's the experience itself landing deeply into the body and becoming embedded, becoming it's a deeper level of embodiment and anchoring in of what it is that actually means, the actual reasons why, the intention, and expressing that out as an energetic emanation of who it is that you're actually stepping into and becoming.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. It's that classic arc. I haven't heard incorporate before, but yeah, it's very well fitted if we think of the tattoo side. I usually talk about like integration,
Mhm,
reflection, even
mhm.
you know, returning those layers.
Sure.
It incorporates, yeah, it's a good word.
Mm.
Good word for it. Mm,
You talked about some of your ancestral lineage
mm,
before, and
mm.
I'd love to have you explore a little bit more of that with me and with all the listeners, the viewers.
Yeah.
You have already touched upon this in other
Mm.
podcasts and how a lot of the tattoos that you have, similar to my situation, were not born from a place of intentionality. And
Yeah.
then also this journey of how you came to apprentice to tattoos and some of your own spiritual openings through Vision
Mm,
Quest,
mm.
sacred medicine,
Yeah.
psychedelics, meditative processes. But for
Yep,
those that haven't
yep.
heard that story, your story, it'd be great to know a little bit more about how you came to walk this path and perhaps flavored within the context of it being your unique soul path to walk, if indeed you have experienced it in that way as a deeper calling of what it is that you've been put here to do and to be.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, the story. 'Cause it's constant, isn't it? You
Mhm.
know? So it's like every time someone sort of asks you to go into that, there's like, you're however many strides along.
Yeah, and
So
what
it's
landmarks along this long, long journey that we have taken do we choose to tell in the retelling of a story?
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, we'll keep it sort of tattoo focused and maybe draw on what you've experienced and I've experienced around initially getting tattooed in a way that's not intentional. So, um, I'd say when I started tattooing, I was, I think I was about 20, 19, 20 years old, right? And I was very far from having any connection to or self-directing myself in a way that was wanting to grow, wanting to discover, you know, um, kind of like a lot of people in this contemporary climate. You don't know where your paths of initiation are. You don't have any of um, these connections that are guiding us in a healthy way, right? Uh, so tattooing initially, I was interested in it on this surface level. Like it'd be cool. What am I going to do after high school? I'm studying visual arts. I don't want to do graphic design. Don't want to be a painter. I can sort of get into tattooing. Um, and there was this part of me though, because those reality TV shows had just started coming out, like Miami Ink and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And they're dramatized. They're highly emotive. I remember watching this one episode, and I think it was a mother who'd lost her daughter, was getting a tattoo done, memorial tattoo. And I remember thinking in the background, I don't know whether it was thinking or what it was, but I can only see this on reflection now, right?
Mhm.
All the way back then, when I was first deciding that like maybe tattooing would be a thing, I was aware that there was this undercurrent that was pretty deep, hey, and part of me was interested in that. I wouldn't even have been able to say that though
Mm.
at that point in time.
Sure.
So if we think of this sort of like longer time frame, and we have the reflection points of what potentially our journeys might be about. Um, it could have started all the way back there. There could have been some background noise around the things that I'm sort of shooting for now back then. But there was a good 10 years of just like being in the head, being in being in the just the instinctual place as well. It's like very heady, very body, not a lot of heart there. Sort of hadn't bridged that space or opened it up. And so there was getting tattooed in a way to try and work out who I was, trying to find belonging, trying to find all these things in the confusing world. And so the classic thing that I mean in Australia anyway is like you just start getting tattooed pretty heavily. You tattoo yourself, you get tattooed by the people you work with, and you end up with like the tattoo uniform, kind of like this folder here with all these stickers on it. It's like you just end up with all this stuff. And so for me, there was two parts. There was like one part of having kind of sound guidance initially. It's like technically learning to tattoo well from some people that were good tattoo artists, and there wasn't many. But then also this sort of like cultural patchwork tattoo thing happening that was really messy. And at the same time, trying to work out who I was amongst that all, seeing all of these like bits of myself that I didn't like. About 2012 was when that was blaringly obvious and blowing up to a point where I'm like, I need to uh, check myself and do something about it. And what do I do? You know, the sort of the inner stir really turned up, and that's when all of the things you mentioned dropped in. You know, it's when like meditation, DMT, vision quests, and the thing that was presenting itself for me as my experience and what I was learning from switched from the technical and the physical aspect of tattooing into the metaphysical or the spiritual aspect. You know, new teachers, understanding what I was doing from that level, um, and it kind of like picked up from there. So yeah, there was probably like, yeah, 7 to 10 years of getting tattooed like pretty unconsciously, a bit of a crossover, and then moving into like, okay, what what do I do now? So how do I actually work with people now? And what do I do about all the tattoos that I have? And that's been the biggest learning curve. That's been a huge learning curve. So having to kind of understand what's happening with tattoos, the function of them, recording information, influencing the way you move forward, you know, navigational aid. And then going, what impact are all these old tattoos having from me? What am I carrying from those, you know, those previous experiences? And like with anything that you're actually being initiated into and fully understanding, you can't understand it like by rejecting it or not going through it. So I can see that all of the experiences that I was lined up with and I'm still working through are kind of, they're instrumental in shaping what this like next thing is, you know? Me talking about like maybe there'll be some type of pattern. The pattern's a result of like my own abrasion and forming, and giving me extra insight into what it is that, you know, I get in a position of having to walk other people through, you know? So there's a lot of that. All the tattoos we have are so valuable, even like the ones that you think are the worst or that you regret. It's like so important.
Yeah, I'd love to touch on those themes shortly. So you mentioned Vision Quest, you mentioned DMT. Were there any
Yeah.
other psychedelics or sacred medicines or ceremonial processes along that journey arc?
Yeah, there was a bit of a cluster
Okay.
at that point in time. You know, I haven't used any medicines or yeah, I haven't used any medicines for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, at that stage, so there was a convention on in Sydney called the Origins of Consciousness, about 2012, I think it was, and a
Mm.
friend invited me, and I went along. I'd never tried any psychedelics ever,
Ah,
and I went there. It was like Graham Hancock, Dennis McKenna, bunch
cool.
of other speakers, and they're talking about DMT.
Mhm.
They're talking about mushrooms. They're talking about ayahuasca. Um, and so off the back of that, there's me there's me just becoming interested in even like the concept of spirit. No embodied no embodied experience.
Mhm.
Read some books and I'm like, "Oh, I'll try the spirit molecule." And so I did that, you know, terrible set and setting, all those things, not on my awareness. Kind of like just getting a tattoo at a biker tattoo shop. You know, it's
Hmm.
just like, "Yeah,
Fitting, hey?
let's do this. Let's do this." Yeah.
Mm.
So that uh changed everything drastically, because I had my first experience. Same with like getting tattooed. People are like, "Oh, I know what tattooing is." You get one, and then on the other side, you're like, "Oh, this isn't what I thought it was." Similarly with that, it was like, okay, DMT. Let's try a medicine, and I came out the other side going like, "Huh, I actually don't know what I am or what this experience is, or what spirit is, or what energy is." But I just had a sort of a touch in with it. I had a touch in. And so something that was like really unknown, I became aware of how little I knew. So it was extremely humbling and extremely expansive, disruptive and expansive. It just like, yeah, big turning point. And I thought, all right, I'm not gonna do anything like this without dropping in with the equivalent of, say, who I was learning to tattoo from. You know, so I ended up in a space where I was learning from the best people you could. You know, they're like booked years ahead, specialists at what they're doing. They understood tattooing, right? And I was like, uh, I want to get out of this sort of street level space where people don't know what they're doing and they don't care, and to get into this like really well curated space with lots of wisdom. So I felt like that after my DMT experience too. I was like, okay, don't know what I'm doing here. Who does? And so obviously that leads you to traditional cultures, right? So from that point, there was a handful of ayahuasca and San Pedro and peyote experiences that just come in the way they do. You know, someone tells you about something, and the conversations are just coming in. But the biggest shift was Lodge and Vision Quest. So there was, again, curated in a way you can't sort of plan. There was just a few different junctions and interactions, and I ended up on the road for a couple of weeks with this fella called Wind. He needed someone to drive him up this way, actually, near Brisbane, so he could pour Lodge for a couple of weeks and sort of sit in on this meeting that he was, on the board for at this cultural center. And in that 2 weeks, kind of like with the DMT, I had these experiences that were extremely expansive and disruptive. Just seeing a proper medicine man doing things that you can't fathom how. So there was that point where I was like, okay, this is someone who really knows at that intricate level, that experience and intricate level, these mysterious um, these concepts, this way of doing things, even like something as simple as prayer or song. Okay, it's like, okay, here's someone that understands that stuff. Maybe I can learn something. And so I asked him if I could apprentice at the end of that 2 weeks. Um, and he said yes. He's like, yep, no worries. 21-year apprenticeship, which was, bit daunting, but luckily I had a bit of context for it because I'd spoken to a Hawaiian tattoo artist um, who'd been an apprentice for 25 years to their teacher who, again, tattooing in that context is different. They're like doctors, right? So there was a little bit of awareness. I said yes. And, I said, I don't want to learn to pour Sweat Lodge. I don't want to learn to do Vision Quest. I just want to learn what you feel is necessary for what it is that I'm doing with people. And he had some context that was really a really good bridge because he actually would cut people. So, he wasn't an artist,
Okay, but
but
incisions before certain passage rites or initiatory
usually after.
processes?
Usually after. Yeah, yeah. So for him, a lot of the time it was like someone had contributed enough to the hoop and gone through their right. So someone that like, had done vision, that had been in service a lot or whatever it is, at certain points, he would sort of have these downloads and he would present them with a marking. So they'd get a cut or multiple cuts that made these little symbols. You probably picture it, like think of centimeter long lines. Then he'd make like a little diamond or a little buffalo, and he'd rub charcoal in from grandfather fire. So he did have an understanding of marking people's bodies, but in almost like another worldly context to where I'd come from. He didn't have any tattoos. He'd never been in a tattoo shop. This is like old Native American man, right? Um, so it was an interesting bridge. It's a really interesting bridge having him as a teacher and, him sitting in on tattoos that I did and sort of weaving in and sort of giving all sorts of transfers and stuff. Um, yeah, so there was that stage, and he put me out for Vision, so I did Vision Quest once with him, but lots of lodge, lots of sweat lodge, and I don't know about yourself, but it's like my most psychedelic experiences, the most altered experiences I've had, and sort of like the furthest journeys, internal journeys, will have all been like sober in terms of chemicals, in terms of like having any plants or substances. They've just been in a lodge space with darkness and harmonics and elements.
Hmm.
Pretty pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And wow, that's an
Mm,
amazing story. So is that
mm.
apprenticeship formally closed up now?
Yeah, he passed in 2018.
Okay. Mm,
So if he was here, I think I'd be about 10 years in.
got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, you
yeah.
certainly provided a lot of insight there into your formative years and how the process of ceremony and deeper connection to spirit kind of helped to pave this path for you. And that's something that I was
Mhm.
going to try and see if there was anything else that you wanted to speak to around any particular experiences, whether it was in the sweat lodge or during Vision
Mm.
Quest or any of your medicine experiences that really spoke more specifically to your unique path and your unique role to play here on planet Earth, doing the work that you're doing and being who you're being. Because what an interesting thing that it's already encoded in your very first name, what it is that you're doing. So I'm wondering if there was kinda any convergence there, because it's obvious as you're speaking, it's like, okay, all of this played it was, it played such a formative journey in your understanding of soul and spirit and all these kind of things now and the way that you approach tattoo, but curious to know if you got anything to say in regards to that.
Yeah, specific experiences. Um, I mean, there's so many, like,
Mhm.
notebooks of different dreams and bits and pieces, but like they're all stories. I don't think I need to share any of them. A
Sure.
big thing that happened during my Vision Quest was I remember coming down and like, having all of these experiences and seeing things and being really interested in what wind might say. And the most important thing is like, you're gonna be a dad, you're gonna be a father soon. This means you're moving into fatherhood type of thing. Me just going like that. It wasn't on the radar going in there at all.
Okay.
It wasn't on the radar at all. And I forgot about it too. Like that's not what I was looking for. So I didn't tag it as important as the thing I was receiving. But yeah, if I look back, when I did sort of read through notes, and I was like, wow, he called that. He said it. I forgot it. I became a dad within the next 12 months. Um, and sort of how big that inbuilt initiation is, nature's initiations or invitations, because not everyone sort of accepts them, right? But these invitations to move into a new stage. And I think this is an important point for anyone that's on that sort of journey or questing, and is that the simplest aspects of our life are the ones that are the most informative and transformative. Becoming a dad. I know you're a dad too, right?
2 daughters,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like it's that layer of, we can be in our own story. Looping back to what you said at the start, it's like we can be in like this super fragmented individual story, you know, trying to be our own main character. But then these big things that just connect everyone are actually the most important pieces.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
they really are.
Yeah.
Just moving into these roles that are like time told. None of us would be here without it.
Mm,
You know,
mhm.
try and understand this one here. Go into this next stage. Um, so yeah, you know, I really appreciated that in my engagement with all of like the magical and interesting things that I could talk about and you can learn. Interesting. The the important ones are like actually quite simple. Hey,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
yeah,
before we return to conversation on tattoo more specifically, let me drop this
mm,
one your way.
yeah.
What's your connection with spirit like now, or what's your connection with faith?
Mm. Yeah, again, I try and keep it pretty simple. So, like I just acknowledge and try and be as aware as I can all the time that there is a creator, whatever language you want to use, right? Like language has been chewed on so much now that like people have an aversion to almost any language you use. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I've been using the OGP as mine, the original greater power. So I think of like there's
Oh,
us, there's our
OGP.
power.
Okay.
OGP.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I think of it as like, there's me, there's my authority and my power, which I think is intrinsically connected to, and inherited from this OGP space. And then I think that there's intermediary, there's others, so it's like there's powers outside of us that aren't the OGP, right? And we can give power to them
I don't know why
or
that
not.
makes me laugh, man. The OGP. Maybe it's because 'cause
Yeah.
I'm thinking about OG, the original gangster.
Yeah, yeah, the original gangster, think of that.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, yeah. Well, the original gangster.
Yeah, I've never heard that
Uh,
before, the OGP. Where does that come from? Is that something that you stumbled upon yourself, or was that borrowed from someone else?
this is language that we've come up with trying to, put the tattoo pathway material together. Because like,
Okay.
people come from everywhere, right?
Mhm.
Again, it's like we're this mixed soil. So it's like, what language do you
Yeah,
use?
unless you wanna
When
preface
you
it by
just
saying the absolute consciousness with a capital C, great creator, the Holy Spirit, God.
Yeah, human language fails,
Mm.
actually. Um, so it's like just trying to frame up that in the relation well, with a tattoo anyway, this is where it's come from. It's like, is the tattoo about yourself? Is it just connected to you? Is it full of yourself? Uh, or is it connected to a power outside of you, which starts to get people to think about what they're being influenced by, what they're connected to? So it could be influenced by someone else, peers, could be influenced by some other interdimensional layer that's in between us and the OGP. So there can be like all sorts of layers of, on the spectrum. Could be like healthy ancestry, for example. Could be some type of interference. But then beyond all of that, you have this original greater power. So there's your power, there's a greater power, then there's this other place, OGP. And so my relationship is to just really simply just have as much awareness of that as I can without thinking I know what it is or what the plan is or how it works. And it's a fascinating thing because I go through cycles of trying to know. It's like kind of our nature. You try to figure things out, and we think more is required. Um, and then all you do is you get in that position where it's just like, I'm confused. I don't know, and it feels like there's actually more distance from it. I'm finding it harder to connect to it. And it's harder to sort of let it in or to feel what that connection's about. So the simpler I keep it, I find, the closer it is, so the less I think I know about it, the more it informs and instructs in a subtle way.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's certainly become apparent on my path over the years as they continue to unfold. The When it comes to ceremonial processes and ritual processions, the importance of simplicity and really the message that has been reinforced time and time again through my connection with Creator Spirit is you can have all the embellishments and extravagant ceremonies and all the bits and pieces, the bells and whistles that you add on. That's all well and good. But one of the most important pillars, it's the sincerity of your prayer and your intention and your connection, your relationship that you're wanting to form. And it can just be so, so simple. It doesn't have to be complex, and I think so many people do overcomplicate things when wanting to develop or cultivate this relationship with something much greater than their sense of self, their immediate sense of self.
Yep. Yeah, I agree, man. It's a complex world, complex time,
Hmm,
you know? Like,
mm. Alright,
yeah.
circling back, tattoos.
Mm.
I'm looking at you.
Tattoos.
If you didn't have your arms up on the screen for everyone who's listening, your
Mm.
most obvious tattoo, it's the moth tattoo, right? on your throat.
Oh, must.
It's right there. You can't miss it. Tell us the
Mm.
story of that tattoo. Is it
Okay.
old? Is it recent? Has the meaning and the way of your relating with it changed over time? And of course, perhaps by introducing us to
Yeah.
some of your own
Yeah.
personal
Okay.
story of some of your tattoos, it'll help us continue building the context of tattoo involving story, identity, meaning, these universal themes of tattoo.
Yeah. 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 I'd love to talk about it, man. Um, I just thought I'd check I'm coming through all right because you went a bit crackly there.
Yeah, you're coming through fine.
Okay. Cool.
Yep.
Um, so it's an interesting thing. I'm always speaking to people about paying attention to your tattoos and when people inquire about them, you know, like your attention's being drawn to them. This one, uh, yeah, it's a cicada actually, and but I get all sorts of things. People think it's a moth or it's a fly or some other type of insect, but it's actually a cicada, and I got it about 6 months after Niana was born, my daughter, firstborn daughter, and yeah, I was kind of in a bit of a grieving process. Was probably on the back of like a bit of a grieving of becoming a father. So we're linking into other stuff we've talked about, but it was just this um, awareness that I thought I was in control of the timer, or that
Mhm.
having a child was about me, right?
Mhm.
My story. I'm choosing to be a dad type of thing. And I just had this profound insight that, you know, her timer actually was maybe more important, or maybe from beyond here, her needing to come through was the mechanism that put me in a space to move into fatherhood. Maybe I wasn't as in control as I thought, especially because on the other side of it, it's like actually it's not what you think it is, you know. So again, if we look at the initiatory arc, there's this severance from who you are. So it's like once you have a kid, it's like your life without kids doesn't exist. It's done, you know? And so it was again another moment of just like disruptive, expansive, a shift of awareness. And so that's what that tattoo was about. Um, really noble and well intended. Uh, the physical result and how it played out afterwards was just like brutal, really brutal. I got tattooed, and for like the next 2 weeks, I was in a really unstable, not unstable, but challenging, psychologically challenging space. It really rocked me. Took a long time for me to accept it, actually. Um, yeah, yeah, and it's still to this day is something that I'm quite active in a process of, I think, trying to fully, if we use your language, incorporate. Doesn't feel like it's at a stage that it's incorporated to a point where there's completion or anything like that.
Mhm.
Maybe it'll be on the back of the fatherhood thing. Who knows?
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I don't
yeah,
know if I
yeah.
missed the important thread here, and maybe I did, but why specifically the cicada then? What was its relationship to the journey of fatherhood and this
Mm,
concept of time?
So the symbolism was the cicada coming through in terms of like visionary coming through. This is me doing the butterfly thing.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
yeah, this is me getting a communication, and the cicada was the symbol of that. So it was explaining. Sorry, I'm a bit nasally. Uh, the cicada was a symbol that was explaining this, like divine timing. Or the nature of this, like in the earth, feeding off the roots of the tree, only coming to the surface when it's like optimal environmental conditions for the continuation of life. This layer, and it's like, well, all of that's happening in the background. If another being coming through is actually being curated by all these sort of back end pieces of timing and information that I'm not even aware of, and then comes through, it's like it's about a lot more than me on this side, thinking like I'm the one that the cicada's coming through for because I'm ready. They're on their own journey. So it just became a symbol of me acknowledging the divine timing, the divine curation. Kind of links back to our last question. Acknowledging the OGP and acknowledging that layer of yeah, our experience being composed beyond us.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The symbolism, the
Mm,
meaning, the intention, all of these threads. Yeah, thanks for sharing that story as well. And this kind of
mm,
will tie us into this idea of not just an idea, but a very lived reality of the skin as an interface. And you've got some
yes.
really great things to talk about this. But look, to touch on, I don't think I've ever spoken publicly about my tattoos on a podcast before, but obvious tattoos for me upon first glance, probably my neck, which is all recent, or perhaps my knuckles, which are quite old now. But my tattoo origin story, you could probably say it goes all the way back to high school. And you could maybe even say primary school. How far back do we want to take it if we follow those intricate threads? But like so many of us, I used to doodle in notebooks, school books. We're at school, not paying attention. And at some stage, I drew these pair of dice, like classic kind of old school, like roadster flaming dice, one with angel's halo and the other with devil horns. And my appreciation for wanting tattoos back then, it definitely ran parallel along with my desire to play drums. And, for if I don't know if you know my story or if I've talked about it somewhat on the podcast, so the listeners, the audience might have some idea. But I played drums in touring bands, punk bands, pop punk bands for well over a decade, a different lifetime, I call it. And as many would know, the music scene, it's full of heavily tattooed people. So I was inspired by that as a way of carving out this sense of identity for myself, like you spoke to earlier, of thinking that one, it was going to make me cool and confident and also potentially become more attractive to girls. All these types of sort of adolescent inclinations of trying to find ourselves, where we fit in. And so I had these sketch of these dice, and shortly after turning 18, I found myself at this tattoo shop that I mentioned to you, purely to ask about the tattoo, to look into more like professional designs. I had absolutely no intention of getting the tattoo done, but somehow, moments later, I found myself laying back in the chair about to have my chest tattooed. So, and then keep in mind, highly impressionable kid, not very assertive, no established understanding of boundaries or consent, all this sort of stuff. And I remember thinking, oh, yeah, what he's drawn up, the design is cool, but I want to explore some other options. And yet still, I hadn't found my voice enough to say exactly what I just said then. And there I was, somehow convinced to sit in the seat and ended up getting tattooed. And man, I remember how painful it was at the time. And I was writhing in the chair. And it looked like someone had thrown a bucket of water on the seat with how much sweat I was producing. And I remember the tattoo. He was kind of like this old bikey guy, like I mentioned. And upon reflection, it almost seemed like he was kind of a bit of a sadist. Like he was laughing, kind of smirking, smiling as I was writhing there in pain. And, in hindsight, I wonder about myself kind of being cajoled into getting this tattoo just so he had some on the spot work and could make some money. But, that was my first experience in getting tattooed. And upon that reflection, there's a lot of considerations worth addressing there. But in saying all that, I wore it as a badge of honor and really sparked more of this entire journey of the journey of searching for identity, for meaning,
Uh-huh.
for place and purpose. So that was kind of my
Yeah.
introduction to tattoo at
That's
18 years
big.
old.
That's big. Yeah, yeah. How old are you now?
38. 20 years ago.
Yeah. Wow, man.
Yeah.
Big one. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pieces there. I
Mhm.
guess some technical things that would be useful if someone's listening and hasn't got tattooed yet is that's a perfect illustration of like what I call the slipstream of the mainstream tattoo
Mm.
industry. You know, like we already touched on, people think of tattoos as like just that moment in the tattoo shop, right?
Uh-huh.
And you dip your toes in, and it's so easy to get tattooed. It's so quick to get tattooed, and that's the river that these tattooists and tattoo artists swim in. They're pretty high level operators there. They want to tattoo you.
Mhm.
Um, that's why I say it's like I don't want to tattoo anyone because I've been there, I've seen it. You know, it's like I don't want to. I'm happy to if it's the right thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, but so it's like I totally understand it. It's like you're telling me that, and it's like it's just like a bit of an archetypical story of what I've seen
Mm.
happen time and time again, and been in that situation myself.
Mhm.
You know, it's so easy to get tattooed, and it puts you in a place of yeah, almost like having to accept something that you know uh, didn't go the way that you sort of envisioned it,
Mhm.
and so it's like it's a harsh learning,
Mhm.
right? But if you can kind of extract the value that's there of this kind of like micro initiation, it's still highly valuable, right?
No.
When I hear things like that, I do listen in a way where I'm trying to excavate and see if there's any part of the story that's still there for someone that might not be um, beneficial. You know, if there's some type of like sticky part of the story that's there that's keeping them pinned in some point in the past. You
Yeah.
know, but you know, obviously, you found your voice now. You know, you're not in that place anymore.
Oh,
So
look, the tattoos are old
keep
school
moving
and
forward.
I love them. They're great. Every now and then I think, "Geez, I should get them touched up and put a little bit more color back into them," but, you know, uh, that'd just be for
Yeah,
aesthetic's sake, really.
yeah,
But, you know,
yeah.
this yeah, you were gonna say something? It's kinda leading us
Well, I
into
was
this
gonna say,
direction of the skin as an
yeah,
interface.
yeah. Yeah, skin as an interface. Well, I mean, this is the thing. You still have a lot of life to live. You know, so who knows what'll happen, man? Who knows how it will unfold and how it will develop, right? Um, and like even just off the back of having this chat, like I find that the more you you learn or get exposed to different concepts around whatever it is, whether it's tattooing, whether it's vision quest, whether it's you know music, doesn't matter. The more you get exposed and imprinted, um, and sort of your depth of understanding deepens, uh, it shifts on you. It keeps growing,
Mm,
you know.
mhm.
And so it's probably safe to say that you still got to continue to get tattooed down the road. You know, you got a lifetime of it.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe the chest will sort of have an evolution, or will sort of grow and start to move into a different shape. You never know.
Yeah, well, I took a big 10-year break. The last tattoo I got was on my calf, and that was after a 6-month journey through Central America. That was the last one. It was over 10 years. And then through exploring some more of my Filipino heritage and going down a healing path and a reclamation path, I decided
Uh huh.
to anchor that in. Now I've got traditional Filipino markings on my left leg, and that kind of sparked the journey again. So it was on distant periphery, and now the idea of tattoo has come in more into full frontal focus over the past year and a half, I would say.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Interesting. Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. So like the first tattoo and the most recent tattoo are the same process.
How do you mean?
So if you think about it, right, it's just one piece of skin,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
It's one piece of skin. So anything that's put onto that is actually part of the same thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, if we don't fragment things out and think that there's you know there's me here and then there's me here, or there's this tattoo and this tattoo, where it's like actually you just have one tattoo on your body,
Yeah.
and so even with 10-year gaps,
Mhm.
you just You're just working into the same thing. You're working into the same tattoo,
Yeah.
but you're in a very different place, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
canvas on the wall. So if you paint something in one corner and then 10 years later you paint something there, they're not a different canvas.
Mm.
They're the same one, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Well,
Yeah.
let's talk about this more. Let's tease this out. Let's talk about what can happen energetically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, the moment ink enters skin. And there's a lot of ways that you could take this. And I heard you, that's where I got the phrase from, the skin as an interface between the inner and the outer world, the skin as a threshold. And from this purely materialistic viewpoint, I'm pretty sure I heard you say something to the effect of basically you could see it as ink being placed in through the skin through incisions or through openings, which results in a permanent marking. And that's just the purely materialistic version. But of
That's
course, as we're speaking to, it's so much deeper than that. So yeah, would
yeah.
love for you to kind of open up this conversation for us.
Yeah. So yeah, on the technical side, what a tattoo is, like you said, is you need skin, you need to cut it, you need to put ink in it. That's what a tattoo is by definition. But then and this is why we go with like tattoo pathway as the language, because it's like that's what the tattoo is. Then the pathway is what sort of unfolds in between your tattoos. What happened in that 10 years between your last tattoo and this one? Yeah, there's a passage there. And each tattoo is sort of like changing your trajectory or your path before you get to a point where you get another tattoo. And so we see the tattoo as information, not as art. It's like that's the best way to sort of frame it up. So it's like there's not lots of tattoos, there's only one. It's not artwork, it's information. When we go to information, we can move from that canvas analogy to like a book analogy. So instead of like a painting here and a painting here, but it's one canvas, we can think of like a page of writing and a page of writing in one book. And so like, are there pages between the pieces of writing? Are the two pieces of writing coherent? Do they even sound like they're written by the same person or not? So what we're going for is like physically balance, harmony, coherence, visually, because that's what the human is. We're balanced. We make sense to look at. When someone looks at you, they're sort of, getting signals from you, and they're also perceiving and sending signals back to you. So like being an instrument in terms of like a somatic, in a somatic way, an instrument that makes sense is important, and the body can sort of feel that. And the information side of it, you want the story to be coherent. This is part of the self-perception, identity, and belonging piece that we're talking about. So every time you get tattooed, and the skin's natural response is this one of healing, right? It's an immune response. Um, and so some of the things that happen are like particular cells come and pull ink away from the surface of the body. They think there's like been something put into the body that shouldn't be there. And so it tries to get rid of it. And a lot of the time it's like, it's also trying to work out what it is. And it memorizes what's gone into the body so that it can respond to that again in the future. And so the carbon and the water just sort of gets contained in these cells. It gets trapped there. It's like you trick the body to hold this pigment and in turn hold this information in the body. If we think of um, how much information water can carry, how you can infuse things, right? It's like as soon as you've been in a medicine space, you see this stuff happening, right? You're talking to the fire, you're talking to the water. And so if we think that there's a layer of structural architecture to what's being put into the body, and then the cells are holding that and recording it, that's information. At the same time, it's like you open the physical body, you open all the different layers of the body, emotional, psychological, spiritual. And so that information then goes through all of those different layers. The body's regenerating the skin physically, stitching it back together at this stage. So all of the layers of us are sort of in this process of recording and regenerating, and that process reinforms who we are. There's like a new relevant realization to what's happening. It's like, oh, you thought that at this point in time that this particular thing was so relevant and important that you open yourself up and you lock it in. You say like, hey, AGP, I just want to acknowledge this right now. Boom. Then you get recalibrated through the skin. And then the world sees that. You look differently. And every interaction you have has taken on a different flavor.
Mm-hmm.
It's taken on a different tune. Right?
Yeah, it changes how we approach the world, changes how we carry ourselves, and it's also changing how other people perceive us.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. And then so the common thread is that people see the tattoos as separate things. So they'll get one story written, then they'll get a different story written. And they don't think about this sort of like harmonization. This harmonization and a big part of the work that I'm doing with people is trying to sort of map all of their tattoos. So it's like if you could look at the whole canvas, if you could read the whole story, you know, how would it read? How would it look? Is that, then we come into like questioning, reflecting, like, is that an accurate representation of who you are? Does that feel like you? Does that feel well fitted? Do you belong? All of these questions that we're sort of prodding at around identity and belonging, we start to assess what that record is, what that tattoo is, through the skin. Like, is that? I know for me, it's like once I started doing that, I was like, it's definitely not. I've got some work to do. There's things that I sort of like need to work on and understand more. And this is what I was talking about in terms of like having to go through it to understand what I take people through. Once you start revisiting areas on the skin, like let's say with reworking tattoos or covering tattoos up, or some people remove them, right? You start to sort of agitate and reopen these time capsules in the body, in the skin, this interface, you know, and that's a profound thing. It's like you start revisiting and re-experiencing and assessing all of these bits of information that are there in the skin. Um, I like to use the language that a tattoo is taking something that's ephemeral or in the moment and making it transcendental. So then it moves through time. It's only meant to exist right now. This moment only exists now. But if I cut myself, especially if I rub ink in it, then I'm capturing that and I'm taking it with me through time now. An imprint, it's like also, I guess, if we use like plants, for example, like the moment of harvest, you harvest something and it like literally captures like this sort of like imprint, this huge imprint at that point in time, right? Timing is really important. So similar things happening through the skin. The skin's this thing where it's like there's a link to what's happening with your internal landscape and your external landscape at that point in time. It's like literally lives there, right? It's like who we are beyond this self
Mm-hmm.
and who we are outside of it, internal, external perspectives. It's like it all gets like written and recorded here. That's why it's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of threads there. So I'm thinking about, okay, so there's the balance on a aesthetic level, what we're looking at in
Mhm.
terms of tattoo
Yep.
placement on the body. So that's one thing to address. But then, as you're saying, do they match up? If I'm to look at some of my tattoos from when I was 18 years old all the way up to them, it's like, no, there's very clearly a split in congruence in terms of style and also meaning, depth of meaning. So, one, there
Yeah.
is that aesthetic visual component, but then what you're speaking to is the invitation into these deeper kind of psychological and emotional meaning making and meaning mapping across the entirety of this journey. And then I'm also thinking about the energetic placements as
Mm.
well, acupuncture
Mhm.
points, meridians,
Yep.
chakras,
Yep.
if there are any places on the body that hold more weight energetically.
Mm-mm. Yeah. Yeah. All of those pieces come into play as well. Um, yeah. Trying to work out sort of what my approach has been trying to work out what's essential and what's non-essential. Like we were saying, there's like there's all the bells and whistles, right? but just your sincerity is kind of the most important thing when you go into ceremony. So I try and do a similar thing with tattooing, where it's like, what's essential, what's not essential. Do we need to know the whole meridian system? Like awareness of it's good, for sure. But there's simpler patterns that exist underneath tattooing in terms of like a complete picture. And so, there's a natural fractal in the body, breaks into like these sort of three sections. Like that's the microcosm of it. You see, we've got three areas. Bottom one's power. It's connected to the earth. It's grounded. Middle one's love. It's our heart. Top one is wisdom, right? It's like our intellect, intuition, instinct, those sort of three. And we're the same, like head to shoulders, shoulders to hips, hips to the ground. We have these regions. So I'm always looking at that when I'm mapping people's tattoos, trying to understand where things land and what they might correlate to. Again, in a very gentle way, because they're self-navigating, right? They're self-navigating. So you're just trying to open little windows and give little cues for someone to understand their own story more, right? And so I'm like you. It's like there's these different styles of tattooing and different times of my life and different energetics, right? And when you start mapping, you can start to cluster them. They become these clusters as you look at them or draw them and map. You go like, oh, all of these tattoos at this point in time are a bit of a cluster. Maybe similar shops, similar layer of identity that I had at that point in time. And then you can look at that record of that cluster and start to understand a really important piece around your story of working out who you are. And it might highlight pieces of like, okay, usually it's like there'll be something that maybe you haven't seen. So it's like, okay, there's something there that I can let go of, a layer of identity that maybe I want to remove. Maybe putting that tattoo on actually concealed an aspect of myself. So this is a classic part of that inversion that happened if we look at the timeline, when they went from elevating to sort of like, shaming people. Part of that flip was that a tattoo usually was someone going, I think this is who I am, and they add a layer. They add a layer. We talk about the costume. So it's like the musician, the drummer costume. For me, it's the tattooist costume. So we add a layer, but it's like, you're not a drummer, right? Who you actually are, that's not
Mhm.
you.
Mm.
I'm not a tattooist. Who I am, that's not me. We wanted that. We wanted to have that identity so that we felt like we belong, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in times gone past, that's what the sort of like cultural and ancestral layer of marking was. Very similar thing. It's like the mimetic function of humans. We want to imitate things, right?
Mhm.
So it's like you want to belong. So you get these things and you belong. And it's on this level of soul. I think from a spiritual lens, sort of like this future evolutionary lens, what we're actually trying to move towards is beyond that.
Mm.
It's beyond that. So it's like who we actually are underneath all of these different layers of identity. And so that usually means letting go of what it is that you want to identify with in your process of getting tattooed.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm thinking about revealing versus concealing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How do you reveal? How does a tattoo process be a process of removing the layers of identity or of self that that are in the way of getting to this place of like selfless, beyond self,
Mm. Mhm.
which is what everyone is. So the thing that actually connects everyone, the thing that connects everybody,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of great invitations and reflection points within all of that. We've
Yeah.
kind of touched on it
Yeah, there's a few.
sporadically, but not specifically. Have you got anything else that you wanna say in regards to the lack or the loss of sacred container around tattooing in mainstream culture, or any kind of ceremonial or ritualistic elements taking place within tattoo work? We've talked a lot about
Um,
the sincerity of it, the sincerity of your prayer and your intention and keeping things simple, but I'm wondering if you do have anything else that you want to contribute there around this this vision of this convergence of ceremony, ritual, conscious
Mm.
initiation, intent, tattoo, all these sorts of threads.
I I think it's more like if I think of the lack is in eldership, you know?
Mm.
There's lots of people that I think are sincere and incorporating ceremony and ritual and, like myself, it's like we're trying to do something. But because there's a lack of eldership or guidance from sort of, you know, the place above where we're coming from and we're reforming something, everyone's just trying to work things out and, like, find their way in the dark almost, you know? And then because of this porous experience, all the screens and the mixing of idea and place and people and whatnot, um, it just makes it really easy for there to be, for things that are insincere or unsincere, what the language is, in or un, for the not real to get exacerbated, you know? It's like, I don't know about you, and I'm keen to have a chat to you more about this, and we will when I get you on my side. But there's this, like, I've had to deal with a little bit of hesitation in not wanting to add fuel to the fire of those that are insincere in that space of holding ceremony or doing work with people in the tattoo space, There's a little bit of like, you wanna contribute, you wanna share, you wanna help, you wanna sort of like see this sort of, regrowth, reestablishment of things that are healthy and sacred. Um, at the same time, it's like there seems to be like a very active process of deterioration and decay that's playing out, you know? And, so there's a layer of like, "Oh, do I wanna expose this thing to the energy that's decaying stuff as well?" It's something that I like, not 100% clear on, like, definitely in a point of just, like, trying to observe and see what that is and, putting pieces out to see what happens to them, you
Yeah,
know?
that'd be an interesting one to tease apart. Okay, round 2 perhaps
Mm,
on your side of things
yeah.
on your podcast.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, well, maybe we can move on to one of our last major themes here. Tattoo
Sure.
regret, identity crises, cover-ups,
Oh, yep,
removal, all this sort of stuff. 2
yep.
phrases that I heard you mention on previous podcasts, never heard before. PTID and DOTS.
Yep.
Post-tattoo
Cool.
identity disorder and delayed onset tattoo shock.
Yep, yep. Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Alright. Yeah, I'm glad you grabbed those. They're in the work as well, hey, formulating, trying to make sense of what's happening for people. So, yeah, PTID, post-tattoo identity disorder. This is, yeah, people getting tattoos and in a nutshell, it not representing who they are, right? And so that can play out in one way where it's like it's confusing for the person, okay? Um, let's say, for example, if we use some of my old tattoos or your old tattoos, it's like someone could be like, look at this punk band drummer, and they think they know who you are. Or me, look at this tattooist that thinks he's a gangster, and they think they know who I am. And there's this mismatch between the identity that we're presenting, so this is external and internal, right? And who it is that, you know, we may believe ourselves to be, or the reality, beyond words of who it is that we are. And then there can also be delusion where someone is presenting an identity and they believe it, and it's not who they are. So like they're in a costume and they believe that's the costume that, that's the character that they are. The other one is you're in a costume and you know you're not the character. You're like, I'm not that character, um, but everyone thinks you are, right? So that would be like a simple way to explain post tattoo identity disorder. Um, but but then there's like obviously the layers that aren't so simple. When you try and sort of unpack what's happening on a psychological level, or on a spiritual level for that particular person. Uh, yeah, that's when it gets a bit more sticky, I'd say, unpacking that with people, you know? I think there's definitely a lot of room for that, supposition, because I'm sort of just putting it out there. It's like, "Hey, I think this is what's going on," for a lot of people. I think I've had this experience myself. I think this is something I'm helping people sort of unkink, undo knots in their identity by having this approach. But I think in maybe a psychotherapeutic space, at Tattoo Pathway, one of the people on the team, Taylor, she's training at the moment in the psychotherapeutic realm. So I think she's going to be able to unpack that in a clearer to understand way, less cryptic than I sort of end up speaking about. She looks at a lot of autobiographical memory and how things are happening from like a cognitive scientific back end around that. Uh, and then the other one that you said, dots. Um, a lot of people talk about it as just like tattoo shock, and it's the slipstream that you were mentioning. You dip your toes in, um, you inquire, and the mainstream sort of pulls you through this process, client journey from an idea of a tattoo to being tattooed, and you pop out the other side, and you're just like, "How did I end up so far downriver? I didn't want this. This isn't me. Why did I decide to do that? What took a hold of me then? You know, what was that current that pulled me? What influenced me?" And you have a shock, right? You actually experience shock, just like, "Whoa, whoa, how'd that happen?" Um, and yeah, it can be anywhere from like some people it's instant, but we've done a bit of research, like we surveyed heaps of people and we're just going into all of this last year. And dots it usually shows up within 12 months. So it's more this 12-month sobering from whatever was driving the idea. I think something like 71% of tattoo regrets within 12 months.
There you go.
Makes sense, you know. Um, but yeah, yeah, they're those two concepts. Super common.
Yeah, I'm trying to reflect on my own experience with what you call dots. Not
Mm,
entirely sure. I'd have to reflect on that more, but PTID, yeah, absolutely. I can track that at various stages along my own journey. And yeah, this relationship between healing versus bypassing and the cover up and the removal process and the spiritual and psycho emotional processes of cover ups and removals.
mm.
What have you got to say about this?
Yeah, healing. Did you say healing as opposed to bypassing?
Yeah.
Yep, yep. Um, well, yeah, I guess like healing is looking at what's there, you know. Someone's bypassing it, they're not, right? That would be the main thing, I suppose. And so if we think of cover-ups and removals, that and tattoo regret generally, right? The bigger little arc here is to pay attention to those tattoos. That's why this mapping part's so important, right? So a lot of people want to just get rid of a tattoo that doesn't feel good. So the thing that drives it is a denial of it almost. Want to pretend it didn't happen. Want to sweep it under the rug. So like here's this mark that I've made and I'm not comfortable with it. So I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm going to get it removed. I hate it. Don't want it. Or I'm going to cover it. Just do whatever you want. I just don't want that one there anymore. And it's like if you come in with that energy, I think that you're bypassing healing. You're bypassing integrating, incorporating. Again, using your language, right? So all of those marks have value. I talk about it like alluvial gold, right? So there's value that's naturally brought to the surface. You don't have to go digging for it. You just need to look in the stream, and there's this high value mineral there that you can use and to shape what's happening next. And so it's fine to remove things and cover things or change things, And sometimes the change is only really minimal. Sometimes a tattoo only needs to be changed and touched a little bit physically to open up that old tattoo. Um, but it should be coming from a place of like acknowledging and having like a healthy comprehension of what happened there in a way that it's moved you to where you currently are. This is to incorporate it, right? So it's like not that never happened. I wasn't that person. Get rid of it. It's like, okay, I can see how I got there, and that's cute that I used to be like that. But I can sort of comb through it and see how I landed there, and I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to find my voice. I'm going to speak up. So yeah, but I don't need to be that anymore either. Actually, I don't need to wear that anymore. I want to incorporate that into the one story in a way. So if we think of the painting or the book, it's like, how does the next piece come in and like harmonize and marry this together? So visually, it is cohesive. And then if it's a book, it's like, okay, so I've got these 2 pages that I just jotted things down in, or someone else wrote something in, and I've been writing this more succinct story here. I'm just gonna like take these notes out and write that into my story here. And then, maybe take that page out. So there's like an editing process. So I'd say that the healing opposed to the bypassing comes from paying attention, you know, sincerity, like you were talking about as one of your main pillars. Our number one pillar at the Tattoo Pathway is self-responsibility. So that kind of grounds all of it. You can build on it from there. We've got self-responsibility, then we have technical knowledge, which is the tattoo stuff, and then we have spiritual wisdom for our foundational 3,
Mhm.
you know. So I think that's probably a big part with the healing. It's just looking at it,
Mhm.
not looking away from it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. A lot of what you're saying is totally resonant on my journey over the past, what's it been now? Hard to say, 4, 5, 6 months. I made a conscious decision to start getting some laser tattoo on a
Ooh,
tattoo that wraps around
mhm,
this
shaman.
bicep. So that was a deep journey for me because I wanted to approach it with as much intentionality as possible, which absolutely
Ah,
required this excavation of all the psychological and the emotional attachments around the tattoo and that entire story about what happened back when I got it. It might have been my second or my third tattoo. I can't remember exactly, but early days, like 20 years ago. So
yeah,
now I have been getting to the stage where I've been noticing just the visual, the aesthetic imbalance
mm,
in how I look because I'm tattooed down to just below the elbow on that arm, but I've
yeah,
got these stars that wrap around on this arm. And the reason I
yeah,
got them was someone in one of my favorite bands at the time had something similar, and it was essentially an
yeah,
imitation process. Again,
yeah,
linked to belonging, identity, these sorts of themes. Red, white, blue, they have a very distinct kind of American look to them, or at least that is how I
yeah,
had perceived them over time.
yeah,
So after sitting
yeah.
with it, it's like, I've integrated that. It's time. I'm ready to go through a process of changing that.
Beautiful.
So, yeah, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So you're actively in a lot of this stuff I'm talking about.
totally. Yeah.
That's so interesting to hear. Yeah, so you can also feel it as well, man. So, uh, a good one for the harmonizing of story and of aesthetic, is to go into the body intelligence,
Mhm.
right? We've got the body mind matrix that holds all of that stuff. So a lot of the things we'll do when we're mapping in our community space is like literally, closing the eyes, tuning into the body and feeling the imprint of where your tattoos are. And it can be super profound if you're sensitive in that way.
Mm.
It's like you can feel the weight and kind of the structure of
Mm.
what it is that you're wearing and living in,
Mhm.
and where things need to have more attention,
Mhm. Absolutely so.
Like,
Mhm.
yeah, you start to sort of be informed that way.
Mm.
Yeah. Beautiful hearing about that. I'm gonna be pretty keen to talk some more about your tattoos and sort of see them too, hey, at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah, sure.
See how that all reads together.
Yeah, when we reverse roles. And we're kinda
Yeah.
getting to this, I don't know if you wanna call it a closing theme, but it seems to be tying a little bit of a bow around these themes of tattoo regret and identity crisis and all of that. And we've already touched on it. It's bringing more awareness to our tattoos and everything around the entire tattoo process. Who was I? Why did I choose this? We're talking about the big reasons why, the intentions. What do I feel now? What story does all of this tell? Anything else
Mm,
that's important to contribute there?
anything else? Yeah, well, I it's kind of zoomed out and a bit of a big one, but I think it does help move beyond the self if we think that there's like a collective story that's in the process of being written too. You know, like at the start, you were talking how we're zoomed into this individual thing, right? And it's hard to avoid the individual thing because it's so self-initiatory at the moment, right? It really is. But there's this bigger, well, I'm going to try and use your language so we keep consistent, like tapestry. We think the tapestry is literally being woven. It's in a point where it's like it's starting to have some visibility now. I think visibility now that really helps because it's like, yeah, it's individual. No one's tattoos are going to be the same. If we use the tattoo thing, no one's walk and story is going to be the same. But it's still all in that sort of same loom. We're all in the same loom, and so it's like you actually don't have to do it on your own, right? Trying to trying to sort of reach out and feel where there is community, you know, and it's so different these days. You know, it's like it's not necessarily you walk outside and it's the person in front of you, you know. It's like some of the threads are like far and wide at the moment, but just I think for anyone, yeah, I think that the bit I'm trying to finish on is like if it's something that you feel like you are doing in isolation or whatever, it's like there's just like lots of other people doing it, even though they're not in front of your face, so to speak. Um, I'm sure anyone sort of tuning into your program's gonna understand that. But if there is anyone that's listening that's in earlier stages or maybe hasn't taken a step into it, whether it's doing, you know, getting tattooed or doing any other sort of transformative work, um, soon as you step in, soon as you start to give it some attention, the visibility starts to come through in this beautiful way, and you know, you move away from the selfish individual story into a bigger thing, but it's still this profoundly unique experience. It's still self-initiatory
Mhm.
because we have that lack of eldership we talked about, that bit that's missing. Um, you know, we're kind of like having to link arms and sort of walk through it together in a way, you
Mhm.
know?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I hear. Well, we can get closer to wrapping this one up. I'll ask you about Tattoo Pathway and the podcast. But while we're here, for anyone that's watching and for those that are
Yeah.
just listening in, I'm just showing Mark some of my tattoos. You can see the difference between the ones that have had the laser, I think 3 or 4 sessions, versus the ones that haven't yet.
Ah.
Big
Yep, yep.
difference in color. So yeah, it's been an
Huge
interesting,
difference.
interesting journey, that one.
Yep,
And
yeah.
then might be a bit hard to see, but you can see those dice that I was talking about earlier.
Ooh, yep.
The flaming old school dice.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, still plenty of room there to bring that sort of whole circuit together.
Oh, there's a stack of room. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yep.
That whole sort of, you know, there's a bit of a template from that, just, you know, halfway or a third down your forearm,
Mhm.
across to the other forearm, across the chest.
Mhm.
That sort of whole area can become one sort of circuit or grid, you know?
Yeah, well, spirit provided. There'll be many
Mm,
more decades to come, mate. So
that's
we'll see
it.
what eventuates there. But before you tell us
Yeah.
about Tattoo Pathway, Tattoos with Intention podcast, side note, I'm curious to ask you this while I've got you here.
Mm,
Have you gone deep into any of the like different historical, cultural peoples and places and their tattoo origins? Because I am curious about
yeah.
tattoo origins from different places and people on different
Yep.
continents, because there are certainly some styles that would make it perhaps obvious that there's some kind of cultural heritage of tattooing in
Yeah.
certain peoples and places. Like I'm thinking about traditional Japanese tattoo art. The
Mm,
Polynesians, Pacific
yeah,
Islanders, where I'm from, I don't
yeah.
know, you might know this. When the Spanish first came to the Philippine Islands, they called those islands Las Islas de los Pintados, the island of the painted ones, because tattoo
Painted
culture
ones.
was a big part of various places within Philippine Islands. So, and then I'm
Yeah.
curious about, have you learnt anything about traditional European tattoo from the Celts, Scandinavians, Nordic people, Vikings?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, so the history side fascinates me. I've done I mean, a lot of what is still accessible, informs me a lot,
Hmm.
you know? This just, like, informs what's happening because, I've been getting tattooed in New Zealand for the past 7 years now. You know, if we think of, like, those first tattoo clusters, the tattoo artist cluster, the more recent ones, I've been going over to New Zealand getting tattooed in a traditional context. So similarly to, like, how I asked Wind to teach me stuff, it's like when I turned up to New Zealand, it's like, "Hey, can you tattoo me? Uh, I I'm not after your traditional patterns," but it's almost like a little bit of a linking and a homage to the history and ancestry of tattooing for the culture of man. You know, they still are tattooing using tools that were made 2,000 years ago, same methods, you know, and the way they make the tools is the teachings, right? So getting tattooed in that space has, informed me a lot. Maori origin story of tattooing has to do with the chief that was instructed with the craft from the inner realms, you know? Native American, a lot of what they did was received on vision, you know, like how to create bundles and perform particular, rites around tattooing, what they were used for. Um, so there's a lot of different origin stories. I think the key takeaway when we think of history and culture and tradition is we have to put ourselves in their shoes of like what the context was of their time and their experience. And it was a supernatural world experience. That's what it was, right? It's like we're in this secular world where it's like whether spirit's a thing or not, or whether we're in like some quantum field or like, you know, it's like there's all of these different bits and pieces to the story now that we have to move through, where their story was cohesive. So again, very well fitted and it was supernatural. You know, it's like all of their process, their tattooing, you know, the way their systems were set up, all had a sound cosmological order that was known and embodied and represented through everything that they did, and even through their language, right? So there's all of the like every isolated group of people has developed a culture that has tattooing, that has song, that has initiations and rites of passages. It's like it's natural human pattern. I think it's trying to come back through in a you know a different form now, right? Repeat itself. Um, but like we were saying, acknowledging that there's something at this stage, keeping it pretty simple, that there's something beyond us, and just trying to sort of reestablish that relationship and let it guide us, I think is kind of really important. And then the potential of what can happen when we do get to that place, even if it's just within ourselves. So we can resolve our own narrative and then connect with people where there's um, a a thread of comprehension of moving forward. The potential of what your tattooing can be, what your journey can be of who we are is just almost unlimited. There's this potential in the story, this mystery aspect, this unknown aspect that's amazing. I got one story I want to wrap up with that just illustrates sort of again this layer of what was known and disrupted and the potential of where things can land with tattoos. And it links to this cultural and historical concept. Okay, my own sort of research in that. So there was a stage where I said, okay, I need to understand more about traditional tattooing and cultural tattooing um, because I just see it as art. You know, I'm in these artistic studios. Okay, and anyone I have to ask there, they don't have anything to give me on it. Um, and my boss at the time, he was from New Zealand, um, and he goes, "Bro, you're just gonna have to go." You just have to go find someone over somewhere else, not here in Australia. And at the time, there was a convention that was going to be on in New Zealand, which was like an indigenous tattoo convention. And so there was, people from all over the world coming, Hawaii, Samoa, Tonga, Greenland, Philippines, they're all coming together. And so I flew over, I stayed with this guy, another tattoo artist, and some other artists were staying with him as well that were going to the convention and working. And we got along that evening, and they said, why don't you come to the opening day where we're going to be in the marae, or like the spiritual house, just artists sharing with one another. I was like, great, love to come and sit in on that. So here I am, the only person that's not working at the convention, able to sit in and listen. And the Hawaiian tattoo family that was there, I mentioned earlier that there was the apprentice of 25 years, right? So he's there along with like maybe another 7 apprentices, and the fella presenting, their head, the kahuna, he was talking very from the heart, sincere about tattooing and where it is in the world, like the ego involved. And, if someone tells you do a good tattoo and you believe them, you're done. He's just explaining these little simple things that I'm just like, wow, this is amazing to hear. And anyway, I was talking to this apprentice. So he told me he'd been tattooing, he'd been apprenticed for 25 years. I said, 25 years, like, why have you been apprenticing for so long? This is me coming from Australia, like 4 years, and you're a chippy, right? And he said, oh, I'm going to be an apprentice till he dies. He said, just like not that long ago, recently, he drew a pattern and explained something that I hadn't seen him ever do in that 25 years. And I was like, wow, okay, cool. When I asked him why he hadn't shown me, he's like, because there was no reason to show you yet. It hadn't come up, So you're just literally sitting in this space and receiving for as long as you can, right? When it comes to this type of cultural wisdom. Anyway, he had a tattoo that was like half of his face black around his eye, like a strip like this. And I asked him about it. First, he was like, what's the black panel? They have lots of black panels in the Hawaiian tattooing. And, hopefully I'm giving context in a sound way. I've got to just say it's not my culture. So if I butcher any of it and someone's listening from Hawaii, try my best. But he explained it's like the darkness or the black is where all the information comes from. So the thing we're talking about, the mystery, like all the information exists in this space, right? So that was the relevance of the panel. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Then he said, have a look here. And there was like a scar. If you looked closely through the tattoo, there was a scar around the eyelid. And he said, I had a tumor behind my eye and I got it removed medically. And it came back. And when it came back, the teacher, the doctor, instructed him in making specific tools and different rites and protocols, to take it down to the ocean under this moon and sing this song and this incantation, and then proceeded to tattoo him. And he didn't know what he was getting or whatever, right? And the tumor disappeared. It didn't come back after that, And so there's, in terms of healing and history and culture, it's like, I think what this illustrates is when there is a harmonious and cohesive story, your sense of who you are and what the world is and your place in it, when all of those pieces are really, really well fitted and they work together like a super well-oiled machine, it opens up so much. It opens up so much. And I think that's the world that we've come out of. Again, using our analogy of the water, that's the pure spring water. That's all of the valuable bits in place. What you can do, what that connection can open up, right? And so, yeah, we're just trying to move back towards that. Hey,
Great story. Yeah, that's fascinating. Wow. Yeah, awesome. It's been amazing, Mark. Thank you, mate.
Cool, man. No worries.
How can everyone connect with you, learn more about your work, stay updated on socials, Tattoo Pathway, Tattoo with Intention podcast, all that stuff?
Yeah, utterly practical things.
Yeah.
Tattoopathway.com is the website. On Instagram, I have the mark of Nara.
Mhm.
And I just started a Substack. So I'm kind of pointing people there where I'm doing a little bit of writing about just initiation more broadly than tattooing. But yeah, my tattoo works on Instagram and on the website. If people want to sort of do any of the more than tattooing aspect, if they want to look at mapping, if they want to do some of that reflective stuff or do work in approach to their tattoos or on the back of tattoos, they want to work out a finish line. You know, a lot of people start getting tattooed and they don't think about what the last tattoo is.
Mhm.
They want to work that out. Yeah, I'm always available. I'm happy to sort of just like jump in calls and do that work with people. And I think that's important, you know, doing the work either side of it. Yeah.
Awesome. Links in the show notes, everyone. Lastly, words of wisdom, perhaps. What kind of invitation or encouragement might you offer to the people looking to deepen into these pathways that we've talked about during this conversation? The obvious is linking up with you, but if you've got any parting words, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, like linking up with me would be like if what I'm saying is something that's of interest, it might not be.
If they've made
You
it this far, I reckon it will be.
How long will we at? A couple of hours, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it's like if they're here, it's like they're here because they're listening to yourself. So for me, it's like paying attention to the things that are calling you. That's the main thing. It sort of keeps coming back to a real simple thing of like just trying to be aware, just trying to pay attention, right? Not go into that sort of autopilot mode. We've got to do the utterly practical things and keep life moving, but a little bit of wisdom would just be to sort of like stop and slow down and pay attention, you know, in the context of what I'm doing in the conversation, it's tattooing. In the broader context, you know, it's like you can't have a meaningful or intentional tattoo without a meaningful and intentional life, right? So there's all of these other threads. You know, you can't just like think the tattoo is something special if you're not paying attention and actually instigating that in your everyday life, like what's in front of you right now, you know. So yeah, I guess just keep paying attention, following that thread, whatever it is that's opening you up to more.
All right. That's a wrap. Thanks again, mate.
So good. Thanks, bro.